Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. So happy to be back. It's Monday. It's always so nice to be back. Thank you for being with us. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And in studio with us, Trent Horn, apologist here at Catholic Answers, writer and speaker extraordinaire. Hello, Trent Horn.
Hello, Cy.
We're going to do tips for defending the faith today, and I'm really looking forward to that. I do not know if you know this, but the world is a bit unsettled right now. Everywhere you turn, it's unsettled. And so a little bit of, reflection on the Catholic faith for a couple hours. That'll do me some good. Sitting here, talking with our good friends who call and ask questions, and occasional enemies who call and ask questions. Do we have any enemies? I don't know if we have any enemies. Well, I don't know. If we do, it's not our choice.
If you don't have enemies, you're not being daring for the gospel. No. I'll tell you, even someone as sweet and gentle as Mother Teresa had plenty of enemies.
Yes, she did. I always think of
Christopher Hitchens?
Christopher Hitchens, yeah. Sorry, the name just went out of my head. God, and we certainly pray for the repose of Mr. Hitchens' soul.
Especially after many of the not so nice things he said about Mother Teresa.
But I think the way that heaven works is that means Mother Teresa will be front of the line advocating for him, praying for him, and helping him. Yep. I think that's how love in heaven works.
And it's the way love should work to here. But yeah, there has been a lot going on. I'm definitely excited for 2 hours of tips for defending the faith today. Just if you have questions about how to defend our Catholic faith, issues that have come up in conversations with people, I'm happy to be able to address it. And then I'm happy to talk to you, Cy, about things that have been going on. A lot of interesting things in the news. I'm probably going to do a podcast on them later this week, and our listeners should definitely check that out at Council of Trent, COUNSEL, Council of Trent over on the iTunes podcast app.
You're going to cover all the problems that were just the general social unrest that we're experiencing? Or
Well, last week I did a show on my podcast called Racism, Riots, and a Catholic Response.
Yeah.
And so people were very open to that, and I think it was a very helpful reply to how people felt about the death of George Floyd, accusations of racism in this country, and also when the lootings and riots were far more prevalent. Now, thankfully, it seems that violent demonstrations and acts of looting and lawlessness have subsided a great deal since
then.
Yeah. But I think what's new in the public mind that's being debated in the public consciousness is the role of police officers. You've seen the city of Minneapolis, for example, the city council there voted to defund their police department or to dismantle it. So the phrase defund the police or police abolition can have different meanings for different people. And so I'm planning to cover that probably on Thursday for a podcast episode. And it's funny, some people I even say, Cy, I've had some people online say to me, stay in your lane, apologist. As if the only thing I can talk about is where purgatory is in the Bible. Now, many of these people don't seem to have a problem when I talk about what the law should be on abortion, for example, or euthanasia, or even other things like immigration or the death penalty. But our Catholic faith informs many of the decisions we make in civil society, and our Catholic faith, it should inform every decision we make. No, I mean, not necessarily. It should inform us, but, it's not like when I'm filling up my gas tank, I'm not like, oh, should I go totally full, or, do I have to top it off? Like, what does my Catholic faith say? It's like there are some decisions we make that are morally neutral, but the question of the role of law enforcement in society is a moral question. And the use of law enforcement, how it should be understood. So I'm going to talk about that on Thursday on my podcast. And I'm going to dive into this police abolition movement, which can mean just reform police work, or it can mean straight just abolishing them. Not having any police officers at all, which I find to be a highly curious position and one that I find to be ultimately untenable. But I have done my best side when I hear positions that seem totally off the wall to me.
Yeah.
Well, look, Catholicism once seemed off the wall to me as a convert.
That's right. So you have to be open to that's a good point.
I give it the benefit I give it its best shot. I give it a chance. But then the more I have read into what I would call hardcore police abolition, or strong police abolition of just disbanding police entirely, I have not found a coherent argument for that. And some people have tried to prey on Catholic concerns related to that. So my podcast on Thursday, I'm going to talk about faith and ethics that'll be involved with a lot of those decisions.
Our number is 888-318-7884. It's tips for defending the faith today, 888-318-7884. If you need a tip for defending faith in general, just the idea that there is God, if you need a tip for defending the Bible or God's revelation, if you need a tip for defending the particulars of the faith that Christ has given us, the sacraments or the Pope or whatever, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Just as far as whether you should top off or not, I believe you should. I believe Jesus would say you should, and I refer you to the 6th chapter of Luke's Gospel, where good measure will be given to you, pressed down, shaken, and overflowing.
But the gas station says not to have it overflow because that's a fire hazard.
Well, I'm just going with the Bible. You go with the gas station if you want. Okay. But I have to say, we and maybe, I don't know, maybe callers want to help us with this, and it'd be fine with me if they did, but or someone wants to send us an email at radio@catholic.com. But
sure,
the Catholic Church teaching is so clear on racism. There's racism is sinful. You can go to a wonderful encyclical from Pope Pius XI, Mit Rennen der Sorge.
It's the only encyclical written in German because it was intended target was for readers in Nazi-occupied Germany.
Right. It was against Nazi racism, but it's against all racism.
Right.
But you can find that, but there isn't. This is the problem that we had in our morning meeting. Like when we say, how can we, do our part to get the Catholic message out, because that's always our thing. It's like you said, we're Catholic apologists, so we're Catholic. On the one hand, you can just keep repeating over and over again, racism is a violation of your call to love. It's a violation of justice. It's a violation of the dignity of the human person. Stop it if you're a racist. But on the other hand, I don't know that the church has proposed or proposes a solution, and so it's very hard to do what, say, a secular show might do and say, here's 10 things on a list. I don't know that as Catholics we can actually provide that.
Well, I think that there are two routes of a solution you would look at in the church's teaching. One would be the ultimate solution. That would be conversion to the gospel, which removes every prejudice and helps people see in the light of Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek, free nor slave, male and female. We are all one in Christ Jesus. So one is a conversion that allows someone to truly see the dignity of the human person in every human person that they meet. You could almost make it an analogy here, maybe to the unborn and abortion. That's ultimately, I believe, another conversion issue, to see the value of the unborn and treat them as such. But also, one can incorporate scientific arguments and other arguments from human reason to buttress that conclusion, and to also provide practical support. So you can use science to refute other pseudo-scientific arguments that are used in favor to justify racism, that promotes stereotypes of different races.
Yeah.
Another thing, if you look at the issue of Catholic social teaching, what can be done can be to work to make society just, so that all people are given an equal opportunity regardless of morally trivial things like race. So removing sinful social structures. Now, the concern that I have, Cy, when I was reading about the police abolition movement is, the first question I ask, the first question everybody has in their mind when they say, we want to get rid of the police. All right, what do you want to put up instead? That's what I would like. That's the number one question I have, and it's never satisfactorily answered, at least in my investigation of it. One answer I've seen as a reply is, well, once we've done away with racism and prejudice and the argument that no, there ought to be just race blindness, everyone's just treated numerically equally. Others might make the argument that no, there are other factors that should be considered in weighing admissions. So you notice we're getting to such an applied element here. The church, there is no document,
and you do have Catholics on both sides
affirmative
of
axio on the question. So there are going to be areas where we prudentially disagree about how to address the sin of racism as it's come in society, just like we prudentially disagree about matters related to economics, immigration, even ways of how we should end abortion. But we should still not lose sight of the big picture of main themes that we do agree on.
Yeah, and we definitely could say stop aborting black babies and stop encouraging the aborting of black babies. But
right,
I mean, that's that. I just want to address one thing before we go to the break, and then we'll come back and we'll do 2 great hours with Trent on tips for defending the Catholic faith. When Trent uses the term race is morally trivial, I just want to defend his use of that in case there's any young person that doesn't understand what that means. That means a black person and a white person, the difference between them is trivial. In a moral sense, there's no moral difference between them.
They are of morally equal worth.
Yeah.
You're right. So I'm not saying that yes, thank you, Cy, for catching that. I am not saying that racism is morally trivial.
No,
racism
you didn't say
is
that, right?
What I said is that race, the difference in race between people, is a morally trivial difference, just as the difference in height is a morally trivial difference.
Right.
But there are differences.
You're not better than somebody else because of your race.
But there are differences in different contexts that are morally relevant. So, for example, the difference between men and women. So let's take a locker room, for example. There's no morally relevant difference between a white man and a black man going into a locker room. There is a morally relevant difference in a man or a woman going into a locker room. So there, sex has a morally relevant difference. Now, in other circumstances, sex is a morally trivial difference, whether a man can vote or a woman can vote in an election.
Yeah.
The difference there is morally trivial. I would say there's the difference between human beings and frogs or trees is a morally relevant difference. So there are biological differences that are always morally relevant, like the difference between human beings and non-human beings. And there's differences that are usually morally trivial, like race or ethnicity. There are serious issues. I'm saying that there are serious issues where prejudice and discrimination make these differences come to light, and we have to discuss them. But the difference itself is just a difference in the melanin content in one's skin. And as a wise man once said, that ought not determine the content. You should prefer the content of a person's character. It's not determined by that.
Just so you know, I know who said that.
You do?
I do.
You probably read it in my book, What the Saints Never Said. Mother Teresa never said it.
That's not true. We'll take a quick break. Right back. We've got about 1 million calls. Exactly. Let me look at 1, 2, 3. 1 million calls for Trent. We'll get to those right after this.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Cy. You don't want to miss today's episode of Catholic Answers Focus, which you can find at CatholicAnswersFocus.com. I get to talk with 2 of our favorite sisters, Sister Maristella and Sister Michaela from the Sisters of Life, and ask about their work sharing the love of God with others and how you or anyone else can gain confidence in the love of God. Check out this week's conversation with the sisters and get access to past episodes at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
I think if you pray and you say to the Lord, Lord, I don't understand, thy will be done. That's a prayer of faith. If something wonderful happens and I say, thank you, Lord, that's a prayer of thanksgiving. If you're distressed and you say, Lord, help me, I can't do anything about this, that's a prayer of hope. And you say, Lord, I can't take one more thing. That's a prayer of desperation. If you're talking to Him about it, that's prayer.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Trent Horn is our guest, and we've got him for 2 hours of tips for defending the faith. If you need help defending the faith, whether you need help with a family member who's struggling with something in the faith, maybe you yourself don't know how, I don't know quite how to phrase this, and I've always wanted to know how to. Maybe there's somebody at work or just in general, there's a problem that you hear, and you'd like to know how do we address that and defend the Catholic faith against this or that accusation or assumption or assertion. That's what Trent is here to do. Trent is an extraordinary apologist, a pro-life apologist, a Catholic apologist. He's written a whole bunch of books, including Answering Atheism, Persuasive Pro-Life, Why We're Catholic, and his most recent, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? I think he wrote that book just because he knew what this year was going to be like. I think he knew. I think you had some premonition, so you wrote a book that you knew would be like a little bit of flame on the fire.
Well, I thought that people would be discussing socialism, but what is ironic is I never thought people would be discussing it in this context brought about by a global pandemic and then civil unrest.
Yeah.
Never. Back in January, the biggest complaint that I had was that I couldn't get a boarding pass to Rise of the Resistance at Disneyland. I was like, the world is so unfair. Oh, if I could only go back to that. If I could only go back to that being my biggest complaint in life.
Melissa in Orange County, you're first listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Thanks, Melissa, for downloading the app onto your phone. Your question for Trent.
Hi, Trent.
Hi.
I was wondering, how can I best minister to my Protestant brothers and sisters who have a hard time understanding that the Catholic Church is the one and only true church that Christ founded, as opposed to a bunch of different denominations?
What do you think is the biggest difficulty they have with that proposition?
So, for example, like the easiest example is like Billy Graham. He did a lot of charity, and I think he did a lot of good works. And so it's kind of hard when, my Protestant friends might be like, oh, well, look at Billy Graham. He wasn't Catholic, but you're telling me he's not saved because he's outside of the Catholic Church? And I'm like, oh, good question.
Sure. So, Melissa, that sounds like they have a separate objection, not necessarily about what the one true church is, but about the doctrine of no salvation outside of the church. So can somebody who is not Catholic be saved? And so what the church teaches is that it is possible for someone, even if they are not Catholic or not Christian, to be saved if they have been open to the revelations that God has given them, and they have not purposely rejected the Catholic faith with full knowledge of what they've rejected. Now, in saying that it's possible for somebody to be saved, even if they're not Catholic, it doesn't follow that it's probable. But we do leave that possibility open because 1 Timothy 2:4 says that God desires the salvation of all men. And that's everyone. That's Billy Graham, that's Mother Teresa, that's the Dalai Lama, that's your worst enemy you've ever met. He desires the salvation of all people and the repentance of all people. So it is possible that so God works in that way. Sometimes you can offer that up, and you might want to ask them like what their view is on salvation. So like, what do you think they would say to the question, like, can somebody be saved if they are not Christian and they never heard of Jesus? Do you have any idea of what their view is probably on that for non-Christians, like if they could be saved?
I feel like they probably would say yes, because God gives everyone a certain amount of grace
to
be saved, and sometimes it's by no fault of their own.
Right. And so what you could just say there is you can take that reasoning and say, so if you find that you believe that and you see that's reasonable, the Catholic Church has that same position. So you could actually move them along and overcome an objection. Because if your friends believe that a non-Christian can be saved, even if they've never known Jesus, that doesn't mean we shouldn't evangelize them. We should give them a sure path to salvation. So your Protestant friends, if your Protestant friends would evangelize people, even though it's possible for them to be saved without Jesus because they want to give them surety, then you can say, then that's exactly what we do as Catholics, and that we want to unite Protestants to the fullness of the Catholic faith, even though it's possible for a Protestant to be saved. So do you see the parallel there and how you can show them that kind of parallel and how the Catholic position makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I would recommend that. And then, Melissa, stay on the line and give our call screener your email address. I will send you a copy of my book, The Case for Catholicism, which deals with many of the objections Protestants, classic and contemporary, make against the Catholic faith and may come up in your various conversations. So I will send you The Case for Catholicism, and I hope it does you well and blesses you. So thank you very much for calling in today.
And hang on there, Melissa. I just put you on hold so that I wouldn't drop you, and Marie will chat with you. Austin in South Louisiana, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app as well. Thanks for downloading the app, Austin. Hey, did you guys get a crazy storm this weekend in Louisiana?
Yes, sir. Tropical storm Cristobal is coming right through.
Oh, it's there now?
Yeah, it is here now. It made landfall last night, I think.
All right.
Wow.
Well, prayers for everybody in Louisiana. I'm glad the phone lines are working, though. What do you got for Trent?
Yeah, so Trent, about a month and a half ago, I was still in school, still in class, and I was talking to my biology professor about everything Catholicism and God, and we had a great conversation, by the way. She didn't have anything negative about the Catholic Church, but
Good.
she does not believe in God. She's an atheist.
Sure.
And I try to help her out. I try to go through Thomas Aquinas' first ways, the argument for motion, and towards the end of it, it says there must be an unmoved mover, and this to what we call God. She said, "Oh, okay, hold on, stop right there. That's a jump. You're saying that this unmoved mover, and then you're just applying the name of God to it. That's a jump." And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and Austin, this is a difficulty that arises in many arguments for the existence of God, where you will get to a conclusion of some kind of ultimate reality and then try to tease out, well, what are the divine attributes of this ultimate reality? And different arguments for the existence of God will give you different attributes. So, like, let's take the design argument. Will give you a designer of the universe, but you might not necessarily get a morally perfect being out of it. You just get a being that designed the whole universe. But if something designed the whole universe and has no designer of its own, so it's personal and cosmic and supreme, in that sense, you're pretty close to God, even if you don't get all the attributes. Now, Aquinas' first way, or the argument from motion that he puts forward in the Summa that other philosophers have expanded upon, a benefit of that argument is that it actually does give you nearly all of the, I would say all of the major attributes of God. And the key there is to understand when we say unmoved mover, it's important to distinguish act and potency. That Aquinas' argument is not, hey, stuff has been moving, so there had to be something that like kicked everything at the beginning of time. That's not Aquinas' argument for motion. The argument is more like, and I guess we might have listeners, or we have some people watching on Facebook, so you can just imagine here, like I'm pushing my cell phone on the table here in the office. So in order for my cell phone to move, it doesn't move on its own, all right? Even when someone calls it, there's motion and causation that gets it to vibrate. So my phone is moving on the table. Why is it moving? It doesn't move on its own. It has a potential to move. To make that actual, my hand has to be moving it. Why is my hand moving? Well, something has to actualize that. So there's these train of causes where potential becomes actual. That actual came from a potential, and it's potential actual over and over. The end of the train, and it's important for you to emphasize with your teacher and others with Aquinas' argument, the end of the train, so imagine like a train car pulling trains, a train yard, boxcar, locomotive. Locomotive is totally different than boxcars. That's why it explains the whole train as motion. In Aquinas' argument, everything that moves, it's potential, then it's actualized. That actualizer had potential, and it goes down this train of potential, and actual, until you get to the locomotive of the universe. And the locomotive of the universe is just pure actuality. If it's pure actuality, it has no potentials whatsoever. And so then there's a lot, if you get, okay, I have a being, something that exists that is just pure act, pure being, it's not potential in any way, shape, or form. When you have that, you get a lot of divine attributes from it. One, you get that it's simple. It's not composed of anything. It's not parts put together by something else. It's the most basic thing that exists. It's necessary because the reason that things go out of existence in this world is because they have potentials. They're made of parts. They can decompose. Whatever this thing is, the reason it explains anything else is that it can't fail to exist. It can't be made of matter because matter is potential. My phone is made of matter. It can go from one hand to the other I'm holding here. So if the cause can't be made of matter, can't be in time, then you get that it's potentials. And actually, you can stay on the line, Austin, because I want to give you some resources after this call. I'll summarize it, how you see how this cause is also all good and all powerful and all knowing. So when we come back, we'll tie up this argument.
We're going to get to an all good, all powerful, all knowing God from your cell phone?
Well, we won't call him, but we will get there analogously.
All right. Right back. I got to hear that right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
How can the Eucharist truly be Christ's body? Does belief in the real presence mean that Catholics are cannibals? Do the Bible and early Christians support Catholic teaching on the Eucharist? In 20 Answers, the Eucharist, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you deepen your own appreciation for this most precious sign of Christ's enduring presence in the world. 20 Answers, the Eucharist is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Every Catholic has heard the challenge. How can you believe that? Don't you know the Bible says? It's a challenge we have to meet. If we can't reconcile apparent contradictions between Scripture and Catholic teaching, how can our faith survive? And if we can't answer our Protestant brothers and sisters, how will they ever come to embrace the fullness of the faith? In meeting the Protestant challenge, apologist Carlo Broussard gives you the knowledge and tools you need to answer 50 of the most common Bible-based objections to Catholicism. Be prepared to give an answer. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Challenge today by calling 844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, getting unstuck.
Are the changes you need to make just not happening? We'll help you find the way forward.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now, back to Catholic Answers.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Trent Horn, our guest, and we're talking with Austin in South Louisiana, who's now going through Tropical Storm Cristobal. And you were explaining how you were going to wrap up your description of how we get to an understanding of the existence of God and His goodness and His omnipotence from your cell phone.
We were getting that the cell phone was a prop to underscore the point about motion in this argument. So Austin and I were discussing about how we look at the train of causes in our universe, and that when things move or change, they're moved by something else. Their potential to move or change is actualized, and then that train of potential to actual, potential actual, it has to terminate in an ultimate cause that's pure actuality. Just like a train of boxcars on a track terminates in a locomotive that generates its own motion and gives motion to the rest of the train. Boxcars pass on motion they've received but can't generate it. Same in our universe, there is a cause that is pure act that gives actuality, motion and change to the universe that itself cannot generate. We talked, so I'll summarize that path a little bit here, but Austin, are you still with me? And did it make sense through some of the attributes I talked about, this being a cause that is necessary, simple, it's immaterial, not in time? Did that so far make sense?
Sure, yes, that made sense.
Okay, and then the other big attributes that would come up then, like I said earlier, that if you get a designer of the universe, you can't really infer moral perfection out of just a designer of the universe. But you can infer perfection, including moral perfection, in this cause. You can infer that because this cause has no deficiencies whatsoever. David Oderberg is an excellent contemporary philosopher who wrote a book recently called The Metaphysics of Good and Evil. So he has a very well-defined treatment of this issue, though the basic treatment has been around for centuries, which is that evil is a privation. Evil is an absence of good. So evil is not a thing God made. Evil is more like an absence of a good thing that God made. Like there's an absence, there should be a good thing here that God made, but it's not here right now. So evil is sort of like if you go to the beach, it's like a hole somebody dug in the sand on the beach. Now, evil's not an illusion. It's a real thing. You can fall into that hole somebody dug at the beach and have a bad day. But it's evil in the fact that there's something missing. But if God is pure actuality, he has no potentials whatsoever, then he's not missing anything. With whatever this causes, it can't be missing anything. It has all perfections. So any perfection or good that exists in our world ultimately has to have its source back at this thing that is pure actuality. So it has to be all good, both good in the non-moral sense and good in the moral sense. Since moral properties exist in this world, they have to have their source in this ultimate cause of the world. And then from there, you would see that if this cause has no deficiencies whatsoever, there would be no limits upon it. So if it has no limits, it would be infinite. Without being limited, it would be all powerful. It could do anything logically possible. If it actualizes anything, that's omnipotence. And if it's the ultimate reason behind why things in the universe stand in relation to one another, not just that things exist, but they exist in a particular way, like Trent is in the studio with Cy. The universe the Earth is 93 million miles away from the sun. This cause would also have to contain within it those set of truths that describe the universe that it actualizes. That in doing so, it also contains these truths, which would make it all-knowing. So that's a quick, big crash course I gave you there, Austin. My recommendation for breaking down this argument more and talking with your professor, a good book on this subject would be 5 Proofs for the Existence of God by Ed Feser, F-E-S-E-R. 5 Proofs for the Existence of God by Ed Feser. The first proof is on the argument from motion, and he goes into all of what I just described to you in great detail. And it's a good book. It's a good book to give to a professor to read about atheism. So is that helpful?
Sure, yes, that is very helpful. And most of the things that you brought up, I actually brought up to her, but I don't know if it kind of gotten through her. Maybe it was a little too much to handle, but
it takes time. It takes time, Austin. And what I'll also say, it's interesting. I remember a while back a survey was done on which professionals believe in God. And I believe in the survey that they asked, who's more likely to believe in God, a biologist or a mathematician? And what's funny is I would have thought a biologist, but actually mathematicians. And upon more reflection, it makes sense to me. Mathematicians are more likely to believe in God because mathematicians believe in universal, invisible things that govern reality, namely numbers and mathematical truths. And it's not like we made up math. Math is something we did not invent. We discovered it. It's the same everywhere. Now, if you look, that's an amazing thing. And in fact, William Lane Craig has developed a whole argument to God based on the universality of mathematics, though I don't agree with his understanding of what mathematical truths are. But it's interesting, Austin, if you think about it, like every culture on Earth has different numerals. Like we have Arabic numerals, then there's Roman numerals. People have different numerals, but they all have the same numbers. Everybody's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the same mathematical operations, the same multiplication table. So that shows even though we invent numerals, we don't invent the numbers that stand behind them. There's a universality there. So I think what's hard sometimes, Austin, is that biologists, they deal with very material things in front of them. Like if you can't show it to me with a microscope or a fossil record, I'm not going to believe it. But sometimes you got to break them of that idea that everything that exists is material. There's philosophical underpinnings to what we understand in reality. So Feser's book will be a good one for that. So I didn't mean to cut you off, though. Is that helpful? Was that helpful for you?
Oh, sure. Yes. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Austin. We're going to go to Suzanne now in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Suzanne, your question for Trent Horn. Hi, Suzanne.
Suzanne?
Okay, while we're waiting for Suzanne, I'm going to tell you something. The best pizzeria on earth is open again after the COVID thing.
Really?
But I can't get there.
What do you mean you can't get there?
Hang on just a second. Suzanne, are you there? No, she's not there.
I think she went to get
pizza.
No,
I can't get there. It's the world's greatest pizzeria. It's open and I can't get there.
The world's greatest pizzeria?
It is the greatest pizzeria in the world.
Can you tell me what it's called?
It's called Pizzeria Amore Mio.
My love of pizza?
It's in...
My lovely pizza.
I don't know what it means. I don't do Italian, but it's in Perth, Australia. And...
I don't know. I think there's a lot of people listening who are going to say Famous Ray's Pizza is the greatest pizza on earth.
Amore Mio.
Even though there's like 30 Famous Ray's in New York City.
I guess Suzanne's not there, so I'm going to go to a different line. Can Marie let me go to line 6 or no? Oh, yeah. Amore Mio Pizza. Well, all right. They're bossing me around about what lines to go to. Anonymous caller, you're up next. Sorry we didn't get to Suzanne, but go ahead, anonymous caller.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes. How are you?
Okay, good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So I was calling. I have a question, and I'm wondering how to answer my friend when we have a disagreement about what God wants for our lives here on earth. So, like, for example, she argues that Jesus took disease and sickness to the cross, so, we should be healed of that now, and if we aren't, then it's basically our own lack of faith. And this argument extends to, like, sickness and poverty and basically anything that's, I don't know, materially uncomfortable here on earth. And I just don't know how to, because I don't believe that, and I don't know how to, like, talk to her about that.
Okay, so she thinks that if you are a Christian, then because you believe in Jesus, if you have true faith, you won't get sick, and I'm guessing nothing else bad will happen to you. Is that her belief?
Yeah, it's kind of like the prosperity gospel, but for more than just wealth. Like it extends to all.
Well, actually, the name of the prosperity gospel, that it's also called the health and wealth gospel. So not just wealth, but they say that you won't get sick. You won't suffer if you truly believe in Jesus. So I think you might ask her first, where does the Bible make these kind of grand promises? Anonymous, I think that sometimes we get into the habit of thinking, okay, someone makes this objection, and someone makes this claim, and in order to refute them, I got to go to where the Bible says the opposite. And you can certainly do that when it comes to this case. But you might want to ask them first, why should I believe that? Where does the Bible make this kind of promise for all people? And it doesn't. I mean, there's places where Jesus says, "Ask whatever of me." In John's gospel, he says, "Whatever you ask of the Father in my name, it shall be granted to you." But then later, when we look at the New Testament as a whole, we see what Jesus is talking about there is asking for things like spiritual gifts. Because in the letter of James says, "You ask of God, and you are not given because you ask wrongly." It says in the letter of James that you can ask for things that are not in accordance with God's will. You ask wrongly. And sometimes it's God's will for us to endure suffering. So first ask her, where does it say that? And then two, you can ask her, I think sometimes it's helpful to point to specific historical examples here. Like you might ask her, were the apostles that Jesus chose to spread the gospel to the whole world, were they real Christians? Now, I would think that Jesus, if he picked 12 guys and then Paul, he would have picked real Christians. And you might ask, what happened to these guys? Were they rich? No, they weren't rich at all. Jesus was never rich. If Jesus was the most righteous person on earth, why wasn't he rich? He was not. He died with just the clothes on his back. He had nothing. And the apostles were certainly not rich, and they certainly weren't always well. They were beaten. They were imprisoned. A lot of bad things would happen to them. Paul was whipped. He was shipwrecked. Sometimes they would be intervened with miracles to save them from suffering, but not always. St. Paul himself, Paul said in his letter to the Corinthians, 3 times I have asked the Lord to remove a thorn in my side, which could have been a person bothering him, or it could have been an illness. And God said, no, I won't. Why not? In his letter to the Corinthians, because he told Paul, my grace is made perfect. My power is made perfect in weakness. My grace is sufficient. As this wonderful song, the worship song by Matt Maher goes, your grace is enough. I love that song. So I think you can tell her that, no, our comfort, like in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, when it says the beginning of the letter to the Corinthians, we comfort others with the comfort we receive from Christ Jesus. It doesn't mean a superficial comfort, like we have no problems in this life. What it means is even if life throws really terrible things at us, we have an eternal perspective, and we keep it in perspective, and that can't take away our joy because of what's waiting for us in the next life. So that's probably the route I would go in my explanation. I will happily send you my book, so please stay on the line, Anonymous, and give us your email address. I'll happily send you my book, Counterfeit Christs, which has a whole chapter actually on the prosperity gospel and why prosperity Jesus is bankrupt. But is that a helpful reply so far?
Yeah, it is helpful. And I think maybe part of it, too, is just I need to learn where to get to the point of just kind of letting it go. Because I'll try, like what you said, just even basic examples of like, well, why are people pouring out? Or like what you were saying about the apostles.
Right.
And it just doesn't seem to matter what I
Well, Anonymous, what happens in these situations is if somebody makes a good point, they may not always tell you because they're embarrassed. So you have to try in just a very gracious way and say, hey, help me, I don't understand. How could these people not be Christians then? Either they're not Christians or it's not true, and Christians do suffer. God calls us to suffering in this life, to suffer on behalf of others. You can ask her, look, Jesus said, you are not my disciple unless you take up your cross and follow me. So you could say to her, what does that mean to take up your cross? And Jesus made it clear it's not a trivial thing. He said, whoever loves me more than mother, father, sister, or brother, or lands, or livelihoods is not worthy of me. That Jesus made it clear he would bring division. People would be depressed and sad. Their families would reject them. Community members would reject them. But he said, take up your cross. That's not a light thing. It has to mean some kind of suffering we endure on behalf of Christ. And that because we have God's grace, we are equipped to endure that suffering for the whole world, for the whole church. We can unite our suffering with Jesus Christ. Paul says in Colossians 1:24, I make up in my sufferings what is lacking in Christ's sacrifice. There's nothing lacking in Jesus. He's fully God and fully man. What's lacking is our role as the body of Christ, the church, to suffer on behalf of the other members and to unite that suffering with Christ's crucifixion to merit graces for them and bring them closer to God. So Anonymous will send you my book, Counterfeit Christs, and just check out the chapter there on prosperity gospel and lots of other good chapters there as well to help you.
Hang on a second. I want to recommend one more thing to you and anybody else who has people tied up in the prosperity gospel, the health and wealth gospel, what's also called Word of Faith. We have an interview about that. It was actually done more than 2 years ago now. It seems like just the other day, but it was done more than 2 years ago. But it's at our... it's on our website. It's called Word of Broken Faith. If you just type into into your Google machine, Catholic Answers, Word of Broken Faith, you'll come to this. And I think it can actually be really helpful if you're dealing with folks who are caught up in really what is the superstition of the prosperity gospel. And a superstition is a thing that is very hard to get out of.
Right.
And so I'd love it if you'd go there. Hey, coming up this week. So thanks very much, Anonymous, for that call. Coming up this week on Thursday, Trent Horn is going to be engaged in a debate with Sam. Do you say Rocha or Roca?
We've been informed it's Rocha.
Yeah.
It is Sam Rocha.
I was going to say Rocha. I just want you to know that.
No.
And so the two of you are going to be discussing what and how. I know I can watch on the Catholic Answers YouTube.
Yes, we have a link set up for that.
On Thursday, what time Pacific?
6 p.m. is what
6 p.m. Pacific. So that's 9 p.m. On the East Coast. Something else in Australia. And what are you going to be debating?
We're debating, the resolution is resolved. No one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a true socialist.
Oh.
So I will be affirming the resolution, and Sam will be arguing the negative to the resolution. Should be interesting.
No, I think you have to be a distributist. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, we won't be discussing distributism, but maybe in a future debate, I've had a lot of people. Maybe we could. That might be an interesting subject for a Catholic Answers focus to discuss or move into. But I have had a lot of people bring up the subject of distributism to me. That will not be. I mean, it may come up anyways. We're going to have live Q&A in the debate. So if you watch the debate and you want to ask us what we think of distributism, you're more than welcome to. But it's something. It's not the forefront. But maybe in a future. But I might be willing to do a future dialogue or debate on that subject, which I consider more of an intramural Catholic disagreement.
So 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, Thursday on our Catholic Answers YouTube channel. You can watch the debate between Sam Rocha and Trent Horn as to whether one can be both a good Catholic and a good socialist.
We're waiting for your call. Grab that line and get on board.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
Every single day, I get to help our listeners of the Sunrise Morning Show wake up, find out what's going on in the church and the world, and then walk with them as we all seek to grow in knowledge and love of Jesus Christ and the Catholic faith. I mean, how could it get any better?
The Sunrise Morning Show with Anna Mitchell and Matt Swain. Tomorrow morning, 6 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Trent Horn is our guest, and we're doing tips for defending the faith. If you'd like tips for defending the faith, you are welcome to call. Up next is Joseph in Kansas, watching on YouTube Live. Delighted to have you, Joseph. Your question for Trent.
Thank you. First, I want to say, Trent, I love your rebuttal series on the Council of Trent.
Oh, thanks.
It's been awesome to watch so far. So I'm a recent convert to the faith. My dad is a Baptist minister, and we struggle with kind of a lot of things in the Catholic faith. And I feel comfortable kind of defending the faith in most areas, but I struggle when responding to like sola fide, forensic justification. So how can I respond charitably to my dad's objections on justification?
Mm-hmm. So your dad's justification on justification, you're saying it's related to sola fide, that he would say it's by faith alone. Because what's interesting is when people put forward these arguments, these objections, a lot of times the words can have very loaded meanings to them, and they mean different things to different people. So how would he put his, as best as you can articulate it, his view of justification and why that wouldn't cohere with the Catholic view?
Well, I think that he would assert that justification is done only through the faith of the individual, and that your relationship with sins is really not tied to your salvation or to your justification. So essentially, once you've accepted Jesus to be a personal Lord and Savior, it kind of gives you this pass card to do whatever you want. You're apart from the works of the law. That's what he would say.
It sounds a little bit like he's an antinomian almost. This is a branch of Protestantism going all the way back to the Reformation. Antinomians are those who are against the law, saying that Christians are not under any law at all. They'll say, well, we are under Christ, under grace, so we're not under law. So Christians, there is no law we could break that could cause that could cause someone to lose their salvation. So, just to make sure I'm clear, when I talk to Protestants, I come across two views of the idea. Among Protestants who say your salvation cannot be lost, the most common view that I've come across is not this particular view, but it's the view that if you become a Christian, and then let's say you become an atheistic serial killer after that, or an atheistic abortionist, take your pick, horrible sins. Most Protestants that I know would say, that only proves you were never saved in the first place. But there is a large group of people, I think Charles Stanley is one, Bob Wilkins is another, I think he has a website called faithalone.org, who would say if a Christian became an atheistic serial killer, he misses out on rewards, but he'll still go to heaven. So is that closer to the view you said that your father has, that once you're saved, doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to heaven?
Yeah, I think if I became a serial killer, like you say, he would say, well, that's only evidence that you were never saved in the first place.
Okay, so
yeah, I think that's pretty
so
accurate.
It's interesting there. That's important for you to have that dialogue with him to figure out what he believes, because Stanley and the others will say it does not matter. If you're an apostate, doesn't matter. You murder somebody, you're saved because your salvation can never be undone. So it sounds like, and I would encourage you here just to ask him questions like, okay, well, where do you draw the line? So if you become a Christian, but let's say you become an apostate, or let's say you believe in Jesus, but you become a notorious adulterer who lives in adultery and doesn't think it's a big deal, even though Jesus condemned that vociferously. So you'll want him to. It's interesting here, and I brought this up with another caller, Joseph. People sometimes call Catholic Answers Live and they think, can you give me the best answer for my friend, my dad, my coworker? I find a lot of times, though, when I'm in these conversations, it's not really us that need to give the best answer. We need to make the other person defend their view and show that it's contradictory. That if you get him like, well, tell me, how do you know that? What sins would show you were never saved in the first place, and which sins would show that you're still going to heaven even if you've committed a sin. Then though, I would point him to other scripture verses, and I think you would make clear. I believe this is paragraph 2008, I think, in the Catechism, around there. It talks about how the grace, the initial grace of salvation, initial salvation cannot be merited in any way. We do nothing for the initial process of salvation. And that's made clear in Catholicism by the fact that we baptize babies. I mean, when a baby is baptized, that baby has done absolutely nothing to merit salvation. We believe that baby is saved by grace alone, through faith alone, and it's the faith of the parents. But that baby, we believe it's grace alone for that kid. And you're saved. Once you're baptized, you're going to heaven. You don't do anything else. Except the only thing you have to do is not renounce it, not commit a mortal sin. Now, he might say, well, I'm not under the law. I would say, but that's not the case. Look in the letter of James. James says that we must obey the royal law. Paul calls it the law of Christ. So we are under a law. The New Testament calls it the royal law or the law of Christ, and we are to be obedient to him. So faith in Jesus, like the Greek word pistis, it doesn't just mean like, oh, I believe in you. It's deeper meaning. There's even a Protestant who wrote a whole book on this, saying that he wrote a book called Salvation by Allegiance Alone, saying that salvation is more, it's not just believing in someone, but it's a continual ongoing obedience to that person that you believe in. So I tell you what, Joseph, I will send you a copy of my book, The Case for Catholicism. It has 2 chapters on justification. One on what Jesus and James said, because you can, once you've read up a lot on it, you can bring up James, which is the only place, James 2:24, where it says we're not justified by faith alone. There's also works, but those works increase our justification. They were not done to earn salvation. They increase the light of Christ given to us through our baptism, which we didn't work for. And then the second chapter I have in that book deals with Paul, just straight, what did St. Paul teach on justification? So I hope that is helpful for you, Joseph. Stay on the line. I will get you a copy of Case for Catholicism. Sorry that I was unable to get to our other callers.
No, you got another hour.
I have an hour. I have another hour. So Tom, Nikki, Charles, stay on the line. I'm sorry I couldn't get to you this hour.
Yeah, don't go anywhere.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere.
Don't make everybody hang up on us.
Don't hang up.
Hard to get those callers.
I know. Stay with us, people. I'm happy to be here for you.
Actually, 2 lines open, too. So the 4 of you that are on the line, hang on the line. We're going to get to your questions as soon as we come back. And then we got 2 lines open. 888-318-7884 is our number. Trent Horn is our guest. The topic today, tips for defending the faith. So if there's some part of faith in God, faith in Jesus, faith in the church that you need help defending, give us a call. 888-318-7884. Multitasking here at Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Here on this program, we're taking calls on if you need some tips for defending the Catholic faith, you're welcome to call. And on our Facebook page, there's an in-depth discussion going about how to make the best peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So we are definitely multitasking here. In studio, Trent Horn, apologist extraordinaire, author of a whole bunch of things, including Why We're Catholic, which was, one of the big smash hit books in the Catholic book world last year and continues to sell vigorously. And now he's got Can a Catholic Be a Socialist with his co-author, Catherine Pekulik.
Catherine Pekulik, yes.
Catherine Pekulik. And this is part of the, Trent's scam where he gets people to write books for him and then puts his name on them. But it's a good job if you can get it. And the book...
Cy, if you can't...
I'm supposed to not... Oh, I forgot I'm not supposed to tease you anymore.
Cy, if you can't use your friends, who can you use? That's what they're there for.
I get emails from people who are deeply offended that I am not polite always to Trent. And then I just messed up. I was going to try to go at least a couple months without getting a be nice to Trent email, and then I was just mean to him. I apologize, Trent.
Well, reply to those people. I mean, I've heard some of them will send you emails. I think you got one from Brent Thorne, Kent Dorn.
Yeah, I get a lot of those.
Pent Morn.
Yeah.
So these anonymous emails that
Pent Morn was the one that scared me. I was like, Pent Morn, that is a scary name. I don't trust that person.
Now we're going to get an email from somebody
whose name Pent
Morn. My name is Pent Morn. What is wrong with my name?
I did not send you a complaining email, and I'm the only Pent Morn I know of.
Right.
888-318-7884 is the number.
It's like on The Simpsons. They go to the itchy and scratchy land, and they get the personalized keychains, and Bart looks for one for him. Like Bill, Barry, Bort. Hey, you don't have a Bart. And it's just like, Mommy, I want that one. No, Bort, come along. Were you talking to me? My son is also named Bort. So there could be other Borts, and there could be a Pent Morn. You never know.
Yeah. I never got to get one of those license plates. There was
Personalized
never
license
a
plate?
Cyril one anywhere.
Or a Cy?
No, not a Cy, not a Cyril. No. Apparently that's not a fancy enough name. Nick, you probably had one of those license plates, right? Did you have a Texas one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nick, you can come across.
We have calls to get to.
I know we do. I know. But I enjoy...
I'm not complaining.
But Cy,
I'm just telling you.
I enjoy our playful banter. So everyone listen
who's
thinking of sending a complaint email to Cy.
Well, I'm going to get them.
You do. Yeah. I enjoy the playful back and forth, the repartee, the riposte of my friend and colleague here, Cy Kellett. So I'm happy to have him play off me a bit in this regards. You know what's funny, Cy? I've never gotten any emails for riffing on you, even for hypothetically murdering you.
I think people enjoy it when you murder me. I think that's actually a feature. I don't think that's a bug. I think that's a feature. People tune in to hear the various ways you're going to kill me on this program. But I say one thing against the blessed holy Trent Horn, and oh man, they are all over me.
The mighty Trent Horn. We already said.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Trent Horn, the mighty apologist for my future Saturday morning cartoon.
The mighty Trent Horn. All right, let's go to a caller. Tom, right here in Sacramento, California, which is the capital of California, named after the Blessed Sacrament, watching on Facebook Live. All of those things are true. Tom, your question for Trent.
Oh, hi, Cy and Ken. How are you doing? Trent.
Wait.
You guys got me confused.
Is this my friend, Tom?
Are we friends? Yeah, I think so.
I have a friend, Tom, in Sacramento. This is my friend, Tom.
I'm glad.
How you guys doing?
Well, any friend of Cy's is a friend of mine.
Tom is so smart. He could do your job. Like, he's... Like, I'm not saying he's smarter than you, Trent, but at least equal.
If he could do my job, he would be on that. He would be on that platform for sure.
What's up, Tom? It's really nice to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tom's got a big family and he's got a farm. The family all well through the COVID and everything?
Everybody's doing great. Thanks be to God. Thanks for asking.
I can't believe my friend Tom from Sacramento called. All right, go ahead, Tom, with your question for Trent.
Okay, so I have a young friend who, maybe based on the whole cancel culture that we're observing in the world, where people are being fired from their jobs and sort of publicly spanked by certain segments of the citizenship.
Oh yes,
is claiming that as a Catholic layperson, it would be loving for him to punish publicly a public sinner. So someone who was flagrantly touting their lifestyle that is obviously against God's law, that it would be loving for this person or a group of persons to go to that person and publicly punish them, even through physical means, in order to get them to stop sinning. And he claims that Jesus turning over the temple, tables in the temple, gives biblical justification for this sort of action.
Right. So here's how I'll address that, Tom. When it comes to engaging others who are manifestly and obstinately engaging in sin, we have to be mindful of the wide variety of circumstances that can be involved if someone is engaging in serious sin. We want to make sure that we don't fall into other sins ourselves in this regard when we're dealing with this person. So, for example, just because some people think that gossip, for example, is just spreading a lie about somebody or a rumor that harms their reputation. And that's true. And when it's a lie, that would be the sin of calumny. But a lot of people don't understand that you can also commit the sin of detraction. Detraction is when you share something that is true about someone, a fault about someone that other people don't have a right to know about. So, for example, if you know that someone is, let's say you know a friend is addicted to pornography, for example, and he's letting it ruin his marriage, and he's confided that into you, you may have an obligation to confront him and say, no, you shouldn't do this. It's harming your marriage, harming your soul, harming your family. You ought not do this, but you wouldn't be justified in telling other people and making it public matter that this man struggles with pornography, because nobody else has a right to know that. It's none of their business. This man struggles with his sins, but even if he's persisting in it, it's been disclosed to you, but a person still has a right to a good name. They have a right to their reputation. And so you wouldn't be justified in just sharing with other people and trying to help him. So in detraction and calumny, the L in calumny stands for a lie. The T in detraction is a truth. Calumny is a lie about somebody's character. Detraction is a truth other people have no right to know. Now, in some cases, people do have a right to know about the truth of someone's grave sins because it affects the common good. So if your friend, the reason his marriage is hurting is not just because he's looking at pornography, but because he's molesting children, well, then you have to go to the police. You have to report him. You have to stop this evil from happening. You have to take steps to do that. So it seems, Tom, like you're saying, your friends are saying, well, if I'm dealing with a notorious grave sinner, I have the right to use any means necessary to stop that person from sinning. And that's not correct, because we believe in a society that is just, and we believe in one where the common good is upheld by lawful authorities. This actually plays into the whole debate about police abolishment. I'll cover that on my podcast on Thursday. But basically, Cy and I were talking about this before the show started. And we as human beings, we as citizens, we only have limited rights to use violence against each other, namely in self-defense. But God has not given us the authority to use violence to maintain the common good. Like if someone's sinning gravely, we can't just go and beat them upside the head to get them to think straight. That would be assault and that would be illegal, because we don't want people coming to us saying that, we've violated their interpretation of moral laws and they beat us upside the head. We wouldn't have a civil society if we could all beat each other upside the head whenever we felt like it. In Romans chapter 13, St. Paul talks about how the state does not bear the sword in vain. He's telling the Christians in Rome, look, you can't just be seditious and revolt against Rome. You can't just you can't just do whatever you want and say Rome's not Christian, I don't care about the laws anymore. Because he says, look, the soldier the state does not bear the sword in vain, is what Paul says. If you were to translate that maxim for today, it would be closely registered to, look, a cop doesn't carry a gun for show. The state has authority from God to use force to secure the common good of society. We do not have that except under extremely limited circumstances, like in self-defense. Now, the question your friends brought up is, what about Jesus? Jesus used violence for people who are sinning. But notice, that's an exception. When we see Jesus engaging other people who are sinners, he doesn't use violence. He doesn't beat people upside the head who are going to stone an adulteress. He doesn't use violence against anybody else, only in this case. Why is that? I would contend, Tom, the reason here is that Jesus was acting in self-defense of his Father's house, that this was in the temple, in the court of the Gentiles, where people had turned what was supposed to be a place of prayer and a holy place into a commercial venture by taking what was once a service Just, hey, we're going to come here as a Gentile pilgrim. I'll give, here's money, here's your sacrificial offering. They had made it a booming commercial enterprise, a raucous booming enterprise by increasing the exchange rates involved. So they turned it into a market, basically, a supermarket, rather than a holy place of worship. And so Jesus saw this and that they no longer had a lawful right to be in his Father's house doing this, and he drove them out. And he used violence to drive all these people out, I would say in self-defense of his Father's property. So you and I can do that if someone's in our home without our permission and won't leave and is a danger to us or others. But it doesn't mean that we have carte blanche to just treat people however we want in order to get them to be reconciled to God if they're sinning. Rather, we are to pray for them and involve the authorities when the matter is sufficiently grave enough. Long answer, but is that a helpful answer, Tom?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Trent. That helps a lot. And that was that example of Jesus was sort of a sticking point that I didn't know how to respond to. I guess the part that is still a little unclear is that some of these behaviors are legal, but not moral. And so
which behaviors?
Canceling people.
Oh, what do you mean? Like, which ones do you mean in particular?
Well, like living a homosexual lifestyle, for example.
Sure.
And being very blatant about it. That's legal under the law.
It's not moral.
But it's not moral.
So what do we do?
To inflict punishment on them so that they would reflect or be afraid to practice that lifestyle and perhaps save their soul.
Well, what I would say, Tom, is that we should ask who has the authority when you talk about punishment, we always have to remember punishment is illicit when the proper authority does not administer it. So, for example, if I'm at the park and my son runs off and doesn't tell me where he was going, I may punish him by putting him in a place for 5 minutes and time out and not let him leave. That would be okay for me to do that. If another parent saw my son do that and took him and say, you have to stay here for 5 minutes, you're going to time out, I would be like, what in the world are you doing to my child? Now, what's interesting, they're doing the same punishment I would do. They're doing the exact same thing that my son deserves at that moment, but it's illicit when they do it because they don't have the authority over this child to administer that punishment. So when it comes to sin, the only authority that exists to punish sin in its eternal and also to administer its temporal punishments is God, because sin is an offense against God. Now, however, our sins also affect others in the community. And so when we sin against one another, sometimes we do incur the lawful ability to punish others for their sins. Many crimes are also sins. And so the state punishes people. We may choose if someone sins against us. I would say that when it comes to as a private individual, you shouldn't say it as, I'm going to punish this person for sinning, because it's going to be really easy to fall into a bad trap of saying, I'm not the rightful authority to do that. I would phrase it this way. When people sin in our lives, sometimes we have to allow the consequences of their sin. They will suffer the consequences of their behavior. So if there's someone who is in a so-called same-sex marriage, for example, some consequences of that behavior, if they're Catholic, may include being denied funeral rites, because that could be seen as glorifying that lifestyle. If they're unrepentant and manifest, losing employment at a Catholic school or an educational facility because you're setting a scandalous example for students. So I would say, Tom, that we have an obligation to admonish someone who sins and to graciously lead them to Christ. And we shouldn't mince words when we admonish, but it's not going to get them to Jesus if we just beat them over the backside of the head. We have to admonish them graciously and then point them to the path of reconciliation. But also, to show the severity of some sins, we may have to allow the person to endure the consequences of their destructive behavior. So I hope that was helpful for you, Tom. I'm so glad you called in.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, bye. You punish your kids with timeouts?
I would say that it's a consequence of their action that when they have lost control over their rational faculties, they need a little bit of time to themselves to regain it.
I have a way better punishment than a timeout.
What is your way better punishment than a timeout?
I make them read What the Saints Never Said.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Sai. You don't want to miss today's episode of Catholic Answers Focus, which you can find at CatholicAnswersFocus.com. I get to talk with two of our favorite sisters, Sister Maristella and Sister Michaela from the Sisters of Life, and ask about their work sharing the love of God with others and how you or anyone else can gain confidence in the love of God. Check out this week's conversation with the sisters and get access to past episodes at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I'm really a revert. There are a lot of converts on Catholic radio, a lot of reverts, those who have come back to the faith. And ever since I came back to a practice of my faith, I started praying the rosary, going to even daily Mass. God has led me on an amazing journey and used me in a lot of incredible ways that I never dreamed would have been possible.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, tonight, midnight Eastern on EWTN Radio.
We got a special offer for you right now while you're listening today to Trent here with us for 24 hours only. 24 hours only when you visit shop.catholic.com and sign up for Trent Horn's brand new Moral Apologetics course in the School of Apologetics. We're offering you an additional 30% off the already discounted price when you use the promo code CAFFLASH. Why did they make this the promo code? This is the crazy. It's CAFLASH. I guess the CA is for Catholic Answers and then Flash. All right, so it's a flash sale. 30% off until 6 p.m. Tomorrow Pacific time. 30% off Trent Horn's brand new course at the School of Apologetics. You can go to shop.catholic.com to get it and put in the promo code CAFFLASH. CAFFLASH. All right, going back to the phones. Nikki, Denver, Colorado. Hi, Nikki.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I've had a question in mind. When people bring up the defense of purgatory, it occurred to me that people in heaven and people in purgatory are probably more alive than we are. And, I usually would ask someone, do you believe people in heaven, or praying to the saints, that do you believe that those people are alive? And,
right.
They normally would answer yes. So my argument is we're praying to people who are alive, or praying with people who are alive.
Right.
Am I making sense, or have I gone off the rail here?
Are you talking about seeking the intercession of the saints and also praying for those in purgatory, that even though they are dead, especially for the saints in heaven, they're alive in Christ, so they're even more, especially for the saints in heaven, they're more alive in heaven than we are here on earth? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and the saints the ones in purgatory,
right.
are also in a part of heaven. Therefore, they also are still alive.
Right. Well, we would say, Nikki, that in purgatory, those who are in purgatory, while they are among the elect, they are those who are saved, who will enjoy eternal life with God. They must undergo a process of purification before they can receive God in the beatific vision in heaven. So they are not in the same position as the saints are who are in heaven. The Catechism, it's around paragraphs, I think, like 1033, 1034, discusses this about the nature of purgatory. We also see this in the book of Revelation. I think it's Revelation 21:17, says that nothing unclean will enter heaven. So I think what you can say, Nikki, when it comes to praying for and to the dead, we can say that when it comes to the souls in purgatory, these are individuals who are undergoing a process of purification. They're being made perfect. And anyone who undergoes this kind of purification, especially being purified of the temporal punishment of sin that we are undergoing now, it's not going to be a pleasant process. And so it makes sense for us to pray for any member of the body of Christ who is undergoing an unpleasant process of purification. So it makes sense to pray for them, but also that the saints who are in heaven, we pray to them, because Hebrews 12:23 says they're the spirits of just men made perfect. Hebrews 12:1 says that they're like a cloud of witnesses who are cheering us on to finish the race. And James 5:16 says the prayers of a righteous person are powerful. So you could just say that definitely the spirits in heaven they have been perfected, and they're righteous, and they're powerful prayers to seek out. And those who are in purgatory, we pray for them because they're members of the body of Christ who are undergoing a process of purification. In fact, one of the earliest testimonies to this in the church's history is in the 2nd century. So in the 2nd century after Christ, there is a headstone by a bishop named Abercius, very old headstone, one of the oldest Christian headstones. And it says, Bishop Abercius, pray for Abercius. And so early Christians, you go in the catacombs, it's all over the place in the catacombs. Saints Peter and Paul, pray for me, pray for Presca. They have different names in there. And the early Christians knew this. You should pray for the dead. But you would say, so praying for them, not just to them, but for them, only purgatory makes sense of that, because prayers, you don't need to pray for people in heaven. They don't need anything. You pray to them, you ask for their prayers. And you don't pray for anybody in hell because it's not going to do them any good. So all that evidence really shows the Catholic view of purgatory is a biblical one, and it's supported by the historical evidence. We got lots more on that at our website at Catholic.com. But Nikki, I'd like to send you a copy of my book, Why We're Catholic, because it has a whole chapter on purgatory, if you are interested in that.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going off the rails saying that those that were in heaven are more alive than we are.
Well, right. What I would say is we don't know exactly what the process of purification is like. So that phrase, more alive than we are, we usually refer it to those who have the beatific vision and have attained complete purification and holiness with God in heaven. And that has not occurred for those who are in purgatory. So I'm hesitant to use that phrase, though they have an experience of life different than ours. We might say they might experience things differently if it's infused directly to their soul rather than mediated through the body, because if you're in purgatory, it's just your soul, not your body, that's there right now. And so it may be experienced in a more imminent, immediate way than here on earth, but we haven't had that revealed. So that phrase, more alive than we are, I find that usually more limited to the saints who are in heaven who behold the beatific vision of God. So I think what you would say, though, those who are in purgatory, their bodies are not mediating anything. Like we sometimes zone out in this life because we have bodies that zone out. We're distracted by the body, by the flesh. But they are souls who immediately receive the purification they need to enter into heaven. And I think that's probably going to be more immediate than the experiences we have even here on earth. So I hope that's helpful, Nikki, and thanks for calling in.
Hang on there, Nikki. Marie, we'll get to you. We'll go to Charles in Kingwood, Texas, watching on YouTube Live. Thanks for joining us, Charles. Your question for Trent.
Yes, hello. I watched a Ascension Presents video by Father Mike Schmitz a while back where he discusses using the Lord's name in vain. And one of the things that he mentions is that using the Lord's name in a way that strips it of its meaning, or to use it meaninglessly, constitutes a grave offense. So when I looked in the catechism for something to that effect, I was able to find something that could perhaps be taken to mean that, but the catechism, from what I've found, directly talks about false oaths and blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering, so is using the Lord's name in a way that where you're not meaning to call upon the Lord, does that constitute a grave offense or not a grave offense, or is it an offense at all? And if it's any of those, why?
Right. So what I would say here, Charles, is that the second commandment prohibits us from taking the Lord's name in vain or abusing the Lord's name. And you're correct that the two grave matters that would be definitely grave matters would be abusing an oath, like swearing to God and committing perjury, for example, swearing to God that you're going to tell the truth and instead lying, using God as a cover to tell a lie would be a grave matter, to commit perjury and to denigrate God's name as a result. And the other would be blasphemy. And that would be where you directly show hatred and defiance towards God, to blaspheme his name, to speak of it in that way. I mean, I'm not going to obviously give examples because that would be good for any of us to hear, but people can pop in their minds, like in a fit of anger saying GD, for example, asking God to, GD this, that's something would be, would be a grave matter. Now, whether it's a mortal sin or not would depend on the understanding it's grave and then consenting to it, whether you understood in that moment what you're doing was mortally sinful and wrong and you still choose to do it anyways, or whether it's just kind of an outburst or a fit. Now, I think, though, that the Catechism, though, also speaks in this section. It says the second commandment forbids the abuse of God's name, every improper use of the names of God, Jesus Christ. So we'll talk about that here in a second when we come back from the break. But it's not just hatred or defiance. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 12, we'll be held to account for every idle word, including the words of the Lord's name.
We will take this quick break. We do have a couple lines open, 888-318-7884, and I think we'll be able to get to you before the top of the hour if you dial now, 888-318-7884.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live. How can a human woman be God's mother? Where in the Bible does it say that Mary was sinless and a perpetual virgin? What can I do to build and deepen my relationship with Mary as my spiritual mother in heaven? In 20 Answers Mary, you'll find biblical evidence for Marian doctrine and devotion, answers to common objections to Catholic teachings about Mary, and guidance on how to imitate Christ as you get to know the Blessed Mother like you've never known her before. 20 Answers Mary is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the Church instead. But we should embrace sacred Scripture, not just as the revealed Word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the Church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible is a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the Church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible is a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, getting unstuck.
Are the changes you need to make just not happening? We'll help you find the way forward.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now, back to Catholic Answers.
Yeah, welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, in the studio today, running the board. Nick, Super Nick Chamberlain, NC Audio. Is that right? NC Audio? NCC Audio. Oh, so I forgot your middle name is Carlton. NCC Audio. And then Marie's answering the phones and screening the calls and all that. Is Zach running the video? Are you doing a good job, Zach? No, he says no. I think he is doing a good job. I think he's being very modest right now. And I believe Thomas is sleeping. I cannot tell what Thomas is doing. Social media. Oh, he gave me the thumbs up. So he's thinking about what he's going to post next on the Catholic Answers social media. Thanks to everybody who makes the show possible. Appreciate all your hard work. And you too, Trent Horn. Trent Horn, apologist extraordinaire. We call him the mighty Trent Horn here. Taking your questions on how to defend the faith. If you'd like some tips on defending the faith, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Charles in Kingwood, Texas is next.
Well, yeah, we still have Charles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say is next, but is on the line still. Charles, still there with us?
Oh, yes. Hello, I'm back.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you up.
Great. So, Charles, and for our listeners who are just tuning in, we were talking about the second commandment, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain, and what does it mean and why it's important. And so we discussed the common elements where one would not want to engage in blasphemy, for example, of uttering malice or defiling the Lord's name with a hatred towards it, as well as using oaths improperly. So swearing to God and vouching for your honesty, but then actually lying and committing perjury, and then you'll be held accountable to God for doing that. However, the Catechism does mention that the commandment also binds us to varying degrees of sin. It binds us in other uses of the name. And before I get to that, the reason it's important, Charles, is because the name is a direct reflection of God's reality. So we're used to names just being mere placeholders in society. Like, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, as Shakespeare would say. So we're in modern society, a name doesn't matter as much. It's almost just a kind of a placeholder. It could be named something else, doesn't matter. But in the context of Scripture and in the context of how God revealed himself, names are an extension of the reality of that which is named. So when Moses asked for God's name, he said, "What's your name?" It wasn't like Fred. It was Eye Ashreye, which is the tetragrammaton YHWH, Yah, which is we pronounce, we believe, Yahweh. I am, and it means I am that I am. We look in Paul's letter to the Philippians, in the great kenosis hymn in Philippians 2:6-11. It says, "Every knee shall bend, not in the sight of Jesus, but at the name of Jesus." So that's interesting that says there in Philippians 2:11. Every knee shall bend at the name of Jesus, even. That it's an extension of his glorious lordship and kingship of Christ, that even at his very name, his reality is made known. So names matter in the divine economy. And so in that case, then there is a subset of breaking this commandment then when we treat the name not even with malice or blasphemy, but just with carelessness, as if the name of God does not matter, if we treated it as a joke. So, for example, paragraph 2143 of the Catechism says, he will not introduce it into his own speech except to the name. He will not introduce God's name in his own speech except to bless, praise, and glorify it. 2155, the holiness of the divine name demands that we neither use it for trivial matters, nor take an oath based on the circumstances. So 2155 says, don't use God's name for a trivial matter. 2143 says we should only introduce it for blessing, praise, and to glorify. And I think that shows, because if we're going to be a witness to other people, if we take the Lord's name and use it trivially, like we step out and say, JC, it's really hot outside today. Well, then that means we're lowering Jesus, and we're acting as if he's only as important as other things around us, other profane words we could use. It's interesting in religious vocabulary, the words, like we think of profanity today, like a profanity is like George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on TV. We think of profanity, but in religious context, the profane is just that of this world. So there's a famous book written, I think it was by a Lutheran author a while back, called The Sacred and the Profane was the name of the book. And so profane in the older sense of the word just means that which is of this world, not of heaven. So when we drag God down to this world to use his name for trivial matters, we profane it. It's almost like a profanity, in that we don't give it the proper reverence it's due. So a bit of a lengthy explanation, but is that a helpful explanation?
Yes, I think so. So would you then say that, so do all instances of, like, let's say someone, would all instances of misusing the Lord's name constitute not necessarily mortal sins, of course, because you need, full knowledge and deliberate consent, but right. Would they all be grave matters?
I think it would depend. I mean, because human language is so varied, I mean, there are some people who have very esoteric senses of humor, in that they're still very holy people, but they may speak about Jesus and Mary in a very light and casual way, that it'd be a very fine line. And it depends on culture too. I mean, there are some people, it depends on context and culture. I mean, there are some people in their particular cultural context, when they say Jesus is my homeboy or Mary is my homegirl, they mean that in a very devout, reverent way, because of the particular context and how they grew up and what they believe. It's a way of a solemn affirmation, like just saying that Jesus is my friend. I have a friend in Jesus. But in other contexts, you might say in more colloquial things, it's almost like in a joking way, where there's like a gradient between being appropriate, inappropriate, but not sinful, or maybe imprudent, And then you would get across the line to venially sinful, as in, well, that, okay, like I would say even just like casually saying JC this, JC that, in a fair amount of circumstances, maybe more of a venial sin. You're misusing the name and not in a grave way, but it could bleed into a grave sin if it's something that becomes constant and a habit, and you don't treat Jesus with the proper reverence his name deserves. So, like, it's kind of like the command against stealing. Is stealing always a grave matter? Well, it's always a sin. But is taking when you're at the Sprouts and you take a chocolate covered almond out of the thing just to sample it, is that a grave matter? Probably not. You're
not supposed to do it.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do it.
Do not make my grandmother
sin.
mad.
It's probably a venial sin. But I remember once I went to a priest and I said, "Father, I snuck a can of Coke into the movie theater and I broke the 7th commandment." He said, "It's venial." So
wait, seriously, I did not know you're not allowed to sneak a Coke into the movie theater. I honestly did not know that. There's no sign that says that.
What do you mean there's no sign? I worked in a movie theater for years. There's always a sign that says no outside food and drink.
I have never. I feel terrible now. Seriously, I feel terrible.
But so when we go back to that, Charles, you look at other sins like the sin of theft. The circumstances can vary so widely. You can go from venial to extremely mortal, depending on the circumstances, the actors involved, what is stolen. There's a similar gradient with using the Lord's name in vain, and it would be up to us to discern one's conscience. Always just err on the side, though, of treating the Lord's name with the reverence and respect that it is deserved. So thanks for calling in.
Thanks, Charles. I totally didn't know about that movie theater thing.
Come on, you really didn't know that? How often have you gone to the movies in your life?
I've gone to the movies probably 1 billion. I'm not good with numbers, but probably 1 billion times.
I'm sure you've gone a lot. There's a sign in there. Now, I will tell you.
Is there a sign, seriously? I'm looking at you all in there. Is Trent right? Is there a sign somewhere that says you can't bring food in?
You have to.
You're not on the air?
Yeah. So you have to. Well, I used to work in the movie theater side. Here's one of my favorite funny stories. Movie theater is my first job I ever worked at. Harkins Movie Theaters in Phoenix, Arizona.
Good old Harkins.
I wore a blue bow tie, blue cummerbund, and suspenders.
Yeah.
It was good times. And I was the ticket taker. And a lady came with a giant salad. And we were right outside the food court.
Yeah.
So we were right next to the food court. And she walks in, and I say, "Oh, excuse me, ma'am. There's no outside food or drink in the theater." She said, "I'm going to bring it in. And who's going to stop me? You?" And then she just keeps walking.
Good
and
for
she
her.
goes into the auditorium.
I like her.
And she goes into the auditorium.
Scofflaw.
And I raised my hand and I said, "They don't pay me enough to stop you." And I just went back to taking tickets.
See, I think
I'm like, it's not Fort Knox.
I have to say, I think I've been quite open on occasion that I had something with me, and nobody's ever said anything to me. And I think it's probably that. I honestly didn't know. Yeah. I mean, I knew that they would prefer that you buy their $11 bucket of Coke or whatever they're selling.
Well, you know what's sad, Si? Because you didn't buy all their buckets of Coke, they did not have enough liquid assets, and they're not going to come back after the pandemic. So
well, it's like you go to an airport, right?
It's your fault.
They will sell you the same price food. Somehow, airports and movie theaters, the people there don't know what regular food costs because they just put these ridiculous prices on it. But I take food to the airport. I don't buy the food at the airport. I take food with me to the airport.
You're allowed to do that.
But so why is that? Why can't I do that to the movie theater?
Well, why can't? Because there's a no. You can't take liquids into the airport, past the security screening.
But liquid, that's a different thing. That's since the shoe bomber guy or something like that. They said you can't have liquids anymore.
You can take food. Yeah, so you can take food because the airport has determined that it's not worth their time to
the airport price,
and also they don't. And also,
exactly
it's a public accommodation. It's not like
what's a movie theater?
It's their.
What about a drive-in
movie
theater? Can I take my own soda into a drive-in movie theater?
I have not been to a drive-in in a long time.
They got one over here at Santee, and it's open right now.
I think you can. I want to go because it's the only movie theater
I don't know why
right
they
now.
show terrible movies. I don't know why. I am not convinced about this. The moral turpitude involved with putting a Diet Coke in your back pocket and walking into the movie theater. I'm not convinced that you are correct about this. I'm going to need some movie professionals to call. If perhaps
I would talk
perhaps
to a
listening
priest
right now
lawyer.
is George Clooney, or who else knows about movies? George Clooney, probably Brad Pitt. If you're listening, give a call.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Sandler, he probably knows.
Wait, I think we have him on the line. Wait, hold on.
Adam Sandler.
Is he there?
No, we have to take a break.
Jabba-doo! You can't be taking the food into the theater.
I don't know.
Come on!
I need a movie expert to call. I'm going to need Kevin James to call and tell me. I think he would let me. I think Kevin James would be understanding about this. I don't know.
I had Gary.
Let's
I
take a break.
had Gary
I'll look this
Sinise
up.
on the podcast. I could give Gary a call, maybe.
I'm going to look in the books that they have for confessors and see what the movie theater thing is. I'll be right back.
Your number one source for Catholic apologetics and evangelization. Catholic Answers Live.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
He was a doctor of the church, a Carmelite, and one of the most famous mystics of all time.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. John of the Cross wanted to help all Christians to become saints. One of his most important teachings was to encourage us all to learn how to love. Where there is no love, he said, put love, and you will find love. He died in 1591.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Unfortunately, no movie people called on the break, so I don't know. But I'm going to have to go with what Trent says. Trent is a professional. He worked at a movie theater. I have never worked at a movie theater. I washed dishes in Denny's at a certain point, so I could probably settle moral questions about Denny's. But I'm feeling a bit sheepish about this one. 888-318-7884, the number. It's tips for defending the faith. I don't want to lead anyone astray. So
Okay, I've got a question. I have a question for you about
Yeah.
Denny's. Would it be the sin of gluttony if I had a Grand Slam and a Moons Over My Hammy at the same time?
That depends, because the rules regarding gluttony are not absolutes. They have to do with what is the circumstance. So if you're celebrating, say, a great feast day, and in or maybe you just got out of prison. Let's say you just got out of prison. All right. I don't mean to bring up old memories for you, but say you just got out of prison and you're just celebrating, that there's nothing gluttonous about that. Then feast, have a feast.
Perhaps I may not have been clear, Si. If I had a Grand Slam and Moons Over My Hammy at the same time, would that be the sin of mutilation of the body? I'm worried that might be like the same as just like the sin of mutilation. Like, why would you injure your body in such a way?
I don't see that, but this also goes back to the person. There's a guy that can eat like 90 hot dogs. He wins every year at the Nathan hot dog contest. You probably can.
You don't think I can eat 90 hot dogs?
I really don't know.
Well, maybe we should find out. But then again, I have children. I can't do
don't
that.
do that. No, yeah.
I can't do that.
Can you sneak a hot dog into the movie theater? Is that allowed? Well, let's go to Daniel.
I don't think that's recommended.
Daniel,
if they cook the food there, I don't think you need to bring in your own cooked food. That's where I got to draw the line. That's not proper food.
No, you can get a perfectly good hot dog at the movie theater for $17.83. Let's go to Daniel.
Sometimes it'll have a bun.
No, you got to pay extra for that.
Right.
Daniel in Lansing, Michigan. I think it must be Lansing. I don't know. Listening on Lansing.
It is Lansing.
Okay. Listening to EWTN Channel 130 on Sirius XM satellite radio. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, how you doing, guys?
Very well, thank you. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
So I've got a lot of friends who identify on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, and some of them were asking me why Catholic adoption agencies should be allowed to not place children with LGBTQ or same-sex couples and still receive government funding or still have a government license to do that.
Right.
And I understand the Catholic reasons why we think a mother and father is the best placement for a child, but coming up with a secular defense is escaping me.
Well, I think what is helpful here is that if they are receiving funds from the government, then they're performing an important civil service, which is making sure that children have guardians. And that's necessary. So the government wants to promote that, and so they'll donate funds to these religious organizations, though they should accommodate these religious organizations to live out their religious principles if it doesn't unfairly inhibit, if it doesn't unnecessarily inhibit the carrying out of that mission. So what I would say here is that we have to remember that adoption is not for the adopting couple. It's for the child. This is something that's often lost in the discussion of adoption. Adoption does not exist so we can fulfill the desires of people who would like to adopt children. That is not what adoption is for. Adoption is for remedying an evil that has happened to a child through something out of that child's control. This child, either through a natural evil or a moral evil, has been deprived of what he has a right to. He has a right to be raised by his father and his mother. He has a right to that. And something tragically in this life has abridged that, either a natural evil like the death of parents or a moral evil like the parents' incarceration or abandonment or something like that. So adoption agencies exist. Their mission then is to try to recreate that that family that has been lost. They can't replicate it. They can't duplicate it, but they can do their best to create a facsimile that is as close as possible. And so what is as close as possible? We want parents that can raise a child to understand what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, how men and women properly relate to one another. And I would say that those who are in LGBT, who identify as LGBT and are in these relationships, are not capable of identifying how men and women properly relate to one another because they have sexual desires that are intrinsically disordered that come to bear in behavior that is intrinsically disordered. Now, I'm not accusing these people of engaging in this behavior like in front of children or with children or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is they're not going to be able to raise a child to show them here is how a man properly relates to women. Here's how women properly relate to men. This is authentic masculinity. This is authentic femininity. It just won't be able to. So Catholic adoption agencies want to be able to prioritize that for children. And also, I think a good point you can raise is there are people who place their children with Catholic adoption agencies for the express purpose of them being placed in wholesome homes that have these particular important values. So I think an example you could bring up, Daniel, is, well, what about adoption agencies that you could have friends, I guess you could have friends that say, what is the big deal? What does it matter if they won't do that? Okay, you might say, well, what did you think of an adoption agency that gave children, that said, that people went to them and said, we are a throuple. So our family is 2 women and a man. We're a throuple. We would like to adopt a child. Should that agency be allowed to say, no, we don't believe that's the best environment for a child. We're not going to place a child there. And you can come up with other examples that come to bear, but you can show that no, there are differences between men and women, and a rightfully ordered way that we can know through the natural law that that men and women ought to relate to one another. And you do your best in these relationships to replicate what the child once had or has a right to, which is a mother and a father. The other problem, Daniel, is that people today now think that men and women, they think there's just no difference between men and women, that there really is no difference between us. But no, men are men, women are women, men cannot become women, women cannot become men. And children do best when they have a mother and father to help them understand authentic masculinity and femininity and the complementarity that exists between men and women. And to purposely deprive them of that when there are so many couples out there who will adopt a child. Even a single parent would be better because at least they're able to, it's better to have one parent who can authentically show a child how men and women relate to one another than 2 parents who have disordered behaviors showing that to the child. So I think that's the path that I might go down. I would recommend, Daniel, if you want some more on these subjects, the natural law, I'd be happy to send you a copy of my book, Made This Way, co-authored with Layla Miller, where we talk about explaining what the church teaches, how to explain it to little kids, and how to explain it to big kids, including adults, on these issues. Another good resource on a lot of this would be Ryan Anderson's book, Truth Overruled. But we'll stay on the line, and we'll send you a copy of Made This Way. So, yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. Going now to Ethan in Chicago, Illinois, watching on YouTube Live. Hi, Ethan. You got a question for Trent?
Hi, Sal. Hi, Trent. I'm a huge fan of you guys and the show.
Thank you.
I just had a bit of a dilemma. I struggle a bit with wanting to talk about my faith and spreading the gospel, while not wanting to seem like I'm shoving my beliefs on others.
Sure.
There's some relatives I can think of right now who are pretty set in their agnostic beliefs.
Yeah, sure.
And I was wondering about the best way of introducing God or Jesus to them without seeming too pushy or aggressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that, Ethan. First, I would say that you should just try to be an example to them, to be Christ for them, to focus on virtue and compassion, to be that witness to them, to want to always provide for them, like the spiritual works of mercy, the corporal works of mercy, to be an example of the Christian life, and then to wear your faith on your sleeve without having to cram it down somebody's throat. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this, like saying things like, "Oh, are you going to be there for dinner next weekend? God willing, I will be there." Or when something great happens, praise be to God, that's amazing. Now you should be careful not to make it seem like you're overdoing it. Try to just do it as you would, as it naturally comes off from you to speak and act in this way, but to allow your faith just to naturally express itself and to let God just show up naturally in conversations of expressing things. Then another path you can go down is just to ask questions, what they think about, the church or God. Like maybe something comes up in the news. You say, hey, what do you think about churches are closed, but like liquor stores are still open? Do you think churches are at least more important than liquor stores? Or people say Jesus is the most important thing in their life. What do you think about Jesus? So when you ask questions, it allows the conversation to be more about what they think, and you can hopefully get them to rethink a few things in that regard. So I would say the 3 steps would be living an example of the Christ-filled life with the fruits of the Holy Spirit, then asking questions. Then the second would be wearing your faith on your sleeve, allowing God to be present in your conversations, including also asking people, hey, if you're having a problem, I'll pray for you. And only the most hardened atheists usually get miffed about that or bristle at the thought of someone praying for them. So if your relatives are agnostics, an honest and gracious reply, say, I'll pray for what's going on with you, and I'm here to help if you need anything. Wearing faith on your sleeve. And then finally, I would say asking them questions and using questions to guide a conversation can be helpful. And then other things you could send them are videos, like, you can look at videos from like Father Mike Schmidt or Bishop Barron that are topical and timely, and you can send it to them, and it might just be what they think about a new movie or something going on in the news from a Catholic perspective that they're interested in, and they just might find helpful, and you just be kind of planting those seeds. So is that a helpful reply, Ethan?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it.
Good. Oh, and one last thing, without being pushy, of course, invite them. Well, you said that they're agnostic. Are they Catholic or
yes.
are they baptized Catholic?
Baptized Catholic, but since it's fallen away.
Fallen away. Okay, so then if they're fallen away, another thing you can do then is inviting them to the sacraments. Not necessarily in a pushy way, but you can just always extend the invitation, especially if you can find an event where maybe it's a talk at a parish on a subject they're interested in. You might want to start with light events where you get to heavier ones. Could be a concert at a parish, like a choir recital. But otherwise, even just going to Mass or to a high holy day, or to invite them to a liturgy that's different for them, like an Eastern Catholic liturgy. I'd say, oh, wow, this is really different and interesting to see, especially with something like Christmas or Easter or Palm Sunday. One of the, especially if something is very filled with joy, Easter, Christmas, Pentecost, but inviting them to sacraments, including reconciliation, you never know. Some of them, they may just need you to hear, hey, I'm going to confession on Saturday. If you want to come with, you're more than happy to join me. Otherwise, we can grab a coffee afterwards. But inviting, it doesn't hurt just to send the invitation. Sometimes you need 99 no's before you get to that grace-filled yes.
Ethan, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who called. There's a bunch of folks still on the line, and we're grateful for your call. I'm sorry we didn't get to them, but I'll tell you, we have open forum both hours tomorrow with Tim Staples, and if it would have worked on today's show, it'll definitely work on tomorrow's show. So maybe give us a call back, and we'll get you on the air with Tim. Trent Horn, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Cy.
And I highly recommend you check out Trent Horn's. Really, it's growing in popularity. Growing in popularity. Trent Horn's podcast. You can find out about it by just going to trenthornpodcast.com. I feel like I was wrong about the movie theater thing. I got to go home and reflect on that. I think maybe
then if movies ever come back, Si, we'll go and see for ourselves.
Yeah, we'll go see if that sign is out there. But I trust you. I believe you about it. I believe you know as much about movies as I know about Denny's, and perhaps I was wrong. Well, we'll see you tomorrow. Anyways, I'm going to reflect on this.